An Arab billionaire was about to sign the most important contract of his life. But everything changed when the janitor's daughter said just 3 words that froze the entire room. Before we dive in, let's light up this comment section with hearts from every corner of the world. $2. $7 billion. That was the number on the contract sitting in front of Khalid al-Rashid at exactly 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. That would change everything. The mahogany conference table stretched 24 feet across the 47th floor of Al-Rashid Tower in Manhattan, and 12 of the most powerful investors in the Western world sat around it, their Mont Blanc pens hovering, ready to sign. Khalid was 35 years old, and in exactly 14 minutes he would become the youngest Arab businessman to control a transcontinental energy empire. His $4,200 Brioni suit fit perfectly across his broad shoulders, and his Patek Philippe watch, a $127,000 gift from his late father, caught the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. Everything was perfect. Everything was calculated. Khalid had spent 11 years building to this moment, sacrificing relationships, sleep, and what some might call a soul. The air in the room smelled of fresh coffee, expensive cologne, and ambition. That particular scent of men who believed they controlled the world. "Gentlemen," Khalid said, his voice carrying the subtle accent of his childhood in Dubai mixed with the polished edges of his Harvard MBA, "Today, we make history." And that's when the door opened. Now, I need you to understand something about what happened next, because most people hear this story and think they know where it's going. They don't. Nobody in that room, not Khalid, not the investors, not even the 6-year-old girl who walked through that door, could have predicted how 3 words would unravel an empire and rebuild something far more valuable. The girl was small, barely 3 feet tall, with tangled brown hair that hadn't seen a proper brush in days and a dress that was clean but faded, the kind of dress that had been washed 200 times because it was the only nice one she owned. She clutched a piece of paper in her tiny hands, and her shoes, worn sneakers with a hole near the left toe, squeaked against the imported Italian marble floor. "Security!" Marcus Webb, the lead investor from London, barked immediately. His face had gone red, the 847 breakfast he'd eaten at the plaza threatening to make a reappearance. "Who let this child in here?" But the girl wasn't looking at Marcus Webb. She wasn't looking at the investors or the contracts or the crystal water glasses worth $200 each. She was looking directly at Khalid al-Rashid, and in her eyes was something that made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't felt in 17 years. Not since his brother Omar had died in that car accident in Dubai. "Mommy said I shouldn't," the girl whispered, her voice tiny but somehow filling the entire room. "But I had to show you." She walked forward. 12 powerful men sat frozen. Khalid's hand, still holding his pen, began to tremble. And then she said it. 3 words that would cost him $2.7 billion, destroy his reputation, and ultimately save his life. "You're my daddy." The silence that followed lasted exactly 7 seconds. I know because later, when investigators reviewed the security footage, they counted 7 seconds of absolute crushing silence in which Khalid al-Rashid's entire world collapsed. Marcus Webb was the first to react. His laugh started low, almost disbelieving, then grew louder until it bounced off the walls like something ugly and alive. Well, he said, leaning back in his $3,000 leather chair. "It seems Mr. al-Rashid has some explaining to do. And here I thought we were dealing with a man of integrity." The other investors began murmuring. Phones appeared. Khalid could already see the headlines forming in their minds. "Arab billionaire's secret love child crashes $1 billion deal." His father's voice echoed in his memory. "The al-Rashid name is worth more than gold. Protect it always." "I don't," Khalid started, but his voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "I don't know this child." "Daddy," the girl said again, and this time there were tears streaming down her small face. "Mommy showed me pictures. She said you would help us. She said—" The door burst open again, and this time a woman rushed in, or rather stumbled in because she was clearly exhausted, her janitor's uniform stained with bleach, her hands red and raw from chemicals. Emma Santos was 29 years old, but the dark circles under her eyes and the premature gray at her temples made her look 40. She had worked at Al Rashid Tower for 3 years, arriving at 4 a.m. every morning and leaving at 8 p.m. every night, invisible to everyone except the security guards who checked her badge. "Lily," Emma gasped, grabbing her daughter's shoulders. "I told you to stay in the supply closet. I told you." She looked up, saw the room full of billionaires staring at her, saw Khalid's face, a mixture of confusion and something that looked almost like hope, and her own face crumbled. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." She doesn't know what she's saying. She's just a child. She called him Daddy. Marcus Webb interrupted, his voice dripping with cruel amusement. "Care to explain that, miss?" "Santos. Emma Santos." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please. I'll lose my job. You'll lose more than your job." Another investor, Richard Chen from Singapore, said coldly. "This is clearly an extortion attempt. A setup. Mr. Al-Rashid, I suggest we call the police immediately." Here's what most people don't understand about moments like this. They think power is about money or contracts or boardrooms with expensive furniture. But real power, the kind that changes lives, shows up in the smallest decisions. And Khalid al-Rashid, despite everything his reputation suggested, was about to make a decision that would define him forever. "Wait." Khalid held up his hand. The room fell silent again. He looked at the little girl, Lily, her mother had called her, and something cold moved through his chest. She had Omar's eyes. Not possible, he told himself. Omar died 17 years ago. This child is 6. The math doesn't work. But those eyes, those impossibly familiar dark brown eyes with the small gold flecks near the pupil that every al-Rashid had carried for generations. "How old is she?" Khalid asked Emma directly, his voice soft but urgent. Emma's hands were shaking. 6:37, she whispered. "I mean, 6 years old. She turned 6 3 months ago. We couldn't afford a cake, so I made her pancakes with a candle in them, and she said it was the best birthday ever, and She stopped, realizing she was rambling. "I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that." Khalid's mind was racing. Omar had died 17 years ago, not 6, so this child couldn't possibly be his brother's daughter. The timeline was impossible. But Emma had said something about pictures, about telling Lily he would help. "The pictures," Khalid said, stepping closer despite the sharp intake of breath from Marcus Webb. "What pictures did you show her?" Emma's face went pale. I can't. Please, Mr. Al-Rashid. I just need to take my daughter and go. I'll quit today. You'll never see us again. Just please don't call the police." She doesn't understand. She found an old magazine, and she saw your photo, and she what? Khalid's voice was sharper now. The other investors were watching like spectators at a blood sport, but Khalid had stopped caring about them. Something was happening here, something that felt bigger than $2. 7 billion bigger than his entire empire. Lily tugged on her mother's uniform. "Mommy, show him the letter from Grandma Rose. You said when I was big enough you'd show him, and I'm big now, Mommy. I'm 6 whole years." "Lily, stop." Emma's voice broke on the word, and she pulled her daughter close, hiding the child's face against her chest. But not before Khalid saw it. A birthmark on the back of Lily's neck, small and crescent-shaped, exactly like the one Omar had, exactly like the one Khalid himself had, hidden beneath his perfectly styled hair. The room had gone completely still. Even Marcus Webb had stopped his cruel commentary, perhaps sensing that something deeper was unfolding, something beyond a simple scandal. "Everyone out," Khalid said quietly. "Excuse me." Richard Chen stood, his face flushed with indignation. "We have a $7 billion contract to sign." "The contract can wait." Khalid's voice carried a weight that made even the most powerful men in the room hesitate. "Everyone out. Now." What happened over the next 14 minutes would later be described by Marcus Webb as the moment Khalid al-Rashid lost his mind. But I think it was the moment he finally found something worth more than money, worth more than power, worth more than the empire his father had spent a lifetime building. After the investors filed out, muttering about lawsuits and broken trust and how they'd never do business with al-Rashid again, Khalid knelt down in front of Lily, his $4,200 suit pressed against the cold marble floor, and he didn't care. His Patek Philippe watch gleamed under the lights, and for the first time in his life, he wished he could trade it for the truth. "Lily," he said gently, "can you tell me about the letter?" Emma made a sound, something between a sob and a gasp, but she didn't stop her daughter from reaching into the pocket of her faded dress and pulling out a piece of paper so worn it was practically transparent. "Grandma Rose wrote it before she went to heaven," Lily said, her voice serious and small. "She said someday I would meet my real family and they would love me forever and ever. She said my daddy couldn't take care of me because he was sick, but his brother would." "That's you, right? Omar's brother?" The name hit Khalid like a physical blow. Omar. His brother's name in this little girl's mouth, spoken with the casual familiarity of someone who had heard it in bedtime stories. "Who?" Khalid's voice failed him. He tried again. "Who was your father, Lily?" Emma stepped forward, her face streaked with tears. "Mr. al-Rashid, please." "My mother. She worked for your family in Dubai 23 years ago. She was a maid, she was young. Your brother was kind to her and she made a mistake. She got pregnant. Your father—" Emma stopped as if the words were too heavy to speak. "My father what?" Khalid demanded, though somewhere deep inside he already knew. He knew because he remembered the sudden departure of the young maid when he was 12 years old. He remembered his father's cold explanation. "She stole from us. We sent her away." He remembered never questioning it, because you didn't question Hamid al-Rashid. "Your father paid her $50,000 to disappear," Emma said quietly, "to leave Dubai and never contact your family again. She was 17 years old and pregnant with Omar's child. She moved to America, had my older sister, Sophia, and spent the rest of her life working 3 jobs to give us a chance. She died 4 months ago. Lung cancer. She left me that letter telling me the truth about Sophia's father, about where we came from." Khalid's mind was spinning. Sophia, an older sister, which meant Lily was. "Lily isn't my niece," he said slowly, the math finally clicking into place. "She's my great-niece, Sophia's daughter." Emma nodded, fresh tears falling. "Sophia died in childbirth. Lily never knew her mother. I've raised her since she was 2 days old. I'm all she has, Mr. al-Rashid. I didn't come here to extort you or ruin your business. I just needed a job, any job. And al-Rashid Tower was hiring janitors. I thought maybe, someday, I could find a way to tell you the truth. But Lily found the magazine, saw your picture, and she's been obsessed ever since. She thinks you're a prince from a fairy tale. She doesn't understand that life doesn't work like that. But it does." The words came out before Khalid could stop them. "Sometimes it does." He stood up, his mind racing through 17 years of memories. Omar, the brother he'd worshipped, dead at 18 in a car crash that their father had called Allah's will. The young maid, Rose, who had been kind to Khalid when he was homesick at boarding school, who had snuck him chocolate cookies and called him Little Prince. His father's iron control over every aspect of their lives, every relationship, every truth. $50,000 to make a pregnant teenager disappear. That was what Hamid al-Rashid had decided his first grandchild was worth. "Mr. al-Rashid," Emma said, her voice breaking, "please don't take Lily from me. I know I'm nobody. I know I have nothing to offer, but she's my whole world. My sister died bringing her into this world, and I promised I would protect her no matter what. I work 16-hour days. I walk 7 miles to work because I can't afford the subway. I sell my blood twice a month for $40 because that $80 buys her school supplies. But I love her. I love her more than anything that has ever existed. Please." Khalid looked at this woman, this janitor who smelled like bleach and exhaustion, whose hands were cracked and bleeding from chemicals, who had devoted her entire existence to a child that wasn't even biologically hers. And he felt something shift inside him. something that had been frozen since Omar died, something that had been buried under years of contracts and acquisitions and the relentless pursuit of his father's approval. "Emma," he said slowly, "I'm not going to take Lily from you." Her relief was so profound she nearly collapsed. Thank you, Mr. Al-Rashid, we'll leave today. You'll never—" "I'm not finished." Khalid's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not going to take her from you, but I'm not going to let you walk away either. Lily is family. That means you are family. And family—" He paused, remembering his father's cold interpretation of that word. "Family should mean something different than it did in my father's house." Emma stared at him, uncomprehending. What are you saying?" Before Khalid could answer, the door burst open again and Marcus Webb strode in, flanked by building security. "Mr. Al-Rashid, I don't know what game you're playing, but this deal is dead. I've already called the other investors. We're pulling out, all of us. And rest assured, the business community will hear about your indiscretions. Your family's reputation." "My family's reputation," Khalid interrupted, his voice carrying an edge that made Marcus Webb stop mid-stride, "was built on lies. On paying off pregnant teenagers and pretending scandal didn't exist. On choosing money over blood." He looked down at Lily, who had grabbed his hand with her tiny fingers. "I'm done with that reputation." "You're committing financial suicide," Marcus Webb sputtered. "That's $7 billion you're throwing away." "Then I'll throw it away." Khalid squeezed Lily's hand. "Some things are worth more. And this is what I've learned about defining moments in people's lives. They rarely look like what you'd expect. They're not always triumphant or beautiful or perfectly timed. Sometimes they're messy. Sometimes they cost you everything you thought you wanted. But the real ones, the ones that change who you are forever, those are the moments when you choose something true over something easy." Marcus Webb stormed out, already on his phone, already spreading the story. Within 47 minutes, Al-Rashid's stock would drop 23%. Within 24 hours, Khalid would be on the cover of every business magazine in the world, and not in a good way. Within a week, his board of directors would call for his resignation. But right now, in this moment, a 6-year-old girl with worn sneakers in her grandmother's eyes was looking up at him like he'd hung the moon. "Are you really my family?" Lily asked, her voice small and hopeful. Khalid knelt down again, this time not caring about his suit or his watch or the $7 billion evaporating around him. "Yes, Lily, I'm really your family. And I'm going to make sure you never have to wonder about that again." Emma was crying openly now, her tough janitor's facade completely shattered. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this? You don't know us. We're nothing to you." "You're wrong," Khalid said quietly. "You're everything. I just didn't know it until right now." The next 48 hours unfolded like a fever dream. Khalid moved Emma and Lily out of their studio apartment in Queens, a 340-square-foot space where they shared a single mattress on the floor and kept the heat at 54 degrees to save on utilities, and into his guest suite at the penthouse. Emma protested every step of the way, insisting she didn't want charity, didn't want to be a burden. But when Lily ran through the penthouse screaming with joy because she'd never seen a bathtub big enough to swim in, Emma's protests died in her throat. "She deserves this," Khalid told Emma quietly, watching Lily press her face against the window, marveling at the view of Central Park 52 floors below. "She deserves so much more than this." "She deserves love," Emma said. "That's what she deserves. Everything else is just stuff." And there it was, the simple truth that Khalid had spent 35 years missing. The truth that his father, with all his billions, had never understood. Money was just stuff. Contracts were just paper. The only thing that mattered, truly, eternally mattered, was how you loved the people in your life. The scandal continued to grow. News vans appeared outside Al-Rashid Tower. Khalid's phone rang constantly with calls from lawyers, PR firms, and former friends who wanted to know how they could distance themselves from him. His board officially requested his resignation on the third day, citing conduct unbecoming of a CEO. But here's what nobody reported. While the world was busy tearing Khalid al-Rashid apart, he was busy learning the names of every stuffed animal on Lily's bed. There were 7, and she insisted they each had specific personalities. He was busy helping Emma fill out an application for community college because she had always dreamed of becoming a nurse but could never afford it. He was busy going through boxes of his brother Omar's things, boxes he hadn't touched in 17 years, looking for any trace of the love story that had been erased. And in one of those boxes, on the 4th night after his world collapsed, Khalid found something that changed everything again. A letter, written in Omar's handwriting, dated 3 days before his death. "Brother," it began, "by the time you read this, I will have done something unforgivable, or something brave depending on who you ask. Father has demanded I never see Rose again. He says she is beneath us, that the child she carries is an embarrassment, that he will pay her to disappear. But I cannot do it, Khalid. I love her. I love the child I will never meet. Tomorrow I am going to tell Father the truth. I am going to claim my family, whatever the cost. If something happens to me, please find them. Find my child. Tell them I love them. Tell them I tried. Tell them the al-Rashid name means nothing compared to love. Your brother, Omar." The letter was dated 3 days before Omar's car accident, 3 days before the brakes mysteriously failed on a mountain road outside Dubai, 3 days before Hamid al-Rashid had declared his oldest son's death Allah's will and forbidden anyone from speaking of him again. Khalid's hands were shaking as he put down the letter. His father had not just paid Rose to disappear. His father had... No. He couldn't think it. Couldn't let himself believe it. But the possibility was there now. A dark seed planted in his mind, and it would grow until the truth came out. What happened next would take months to unravel. It would involve private investigators, DNA tests, and the discovery of $50,000 transferred to a mechanic in Dubai 17 years ago. It would involve the complete destruction of Hamid al-Rashid's legacy and the rebuilding of something new from the ashes. But all of that was still to come. For now, in this moment, Khalid held his brother's letter and wept for a love story that had been murdered before it could bloom. For a child, Sophia, who had grown up without knowing her father's name. For a grandchild, Lily, who called a janitor mommy because that janitor had sacrificed everything to give her a life. And somewhere in that grief, Khalid made a promise, not to the investors who had abandoned him, not to the board that had betrayed him, not even to his father's memory. He made a promise to a 6-year-old girl with worn sneakers and hope in her eyes. "I will make this right, Lily," he whispered into the darkness of his study. "I will give you the family you deserve." Emma found him there at 2:47 a.m., still holding the letter. Tears dried on his face. She sat beside him without speaking, and for a long moment they simply existed in the same space. Two people brought together by tragedy and secrets, and a little girl's 3 impossible words. "Your brother loved my mother," Emma finally said. She talked about him until the day she died. She said he was kind, that he read poetry to her, that he promised he would find a way for them to be together. "He tried," Khalid said, his voice rough. "He wrote this letter 3 days before he died. He was going to tell our father. He was going to claim your family." Emma took the letter, read it slowly, and when she looked up, her eyes were bright with tears. "Then we have to finish what he started. Not for revenge, not for money, for Lily. She deserves to know where she comes from, who she really is." Khalid nodded slowly. "And you? What do you deserve, Emma? You've sacrificed everything, your career, your health, your entire life, for a child that isn't even yours by blood." Emma smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her, and it transformed her exhausted face into something beautiful. "She is mine by every measure that matters. Blood doesn't make family, Mr. al-Rashid. Love does." "Khalid," he said quietly. "Call me Khalid. I think we're past formalities." "Khalid." She tested the name like it was something fragile. "What happens now?" He looked at the letter, at the woman beside him, at the closed door behind which a 6-year-old girl was sleeping in a real bed for the first time in her life. Now, he said, we find out the truth. All of it. And then we build something better than what came before. The journey ahead would be harder than either of them could imagine. The secrets buried in the Al-Rashid family would prove darker than any scandal. And Lily, innocent, hopeful, impossible Lily, would be at the center of it all, her 3 words echoing through every revelation to come. But for tonight there was this. 2 people who had been strangers 48 hours ago sitting in the darkness, united by a promise to a little girl. And sometimes, that's where the best stories begin. The next 17 days passed in a blur of investigation and revelation, each discovery more devastating than the last. Khalid hired a private security firm, not the kind that protected buildings, but the kind that uncovered secrets people had spent decades burying. They worked out of a suite on the 43rd floor of Al-Rashid Tower, 3 floors below the boardroom where Lily's words had changed everything, and their findings arrived in manila folders that grew thicker by the day. Emma continued working, not as a janitor anymore, but in a temporary role Khalid had created for her while they sorted through the chaos. She organized, she filed, she made herself useful in ways that had nothing to do with cleaning. And every evening at precisely 6 p.m., she left to pick up Lily from the private school Khalid had enrolled her in, a school that cost $47,000 per year and had a waiting list 3 years long, except when the Al-Rashid name was attached to the application. She's thriving, Emma told Khalid one evening, her voice carrying that particular wonder of someone watching a miracle unfold. Her teacher says she's reading at a 3rd grade level. She made 4 friends on her first day. 4, Khalid. In our old neighborhood, the other kids made fun of her shoes. Khalid looked up from the folder he'd been reviewing, this one containing bank records from 2007, showing suspicious transfers between his father and various entities in Dubai. She's remarkable, like her aunt. Emma's cheeks flushed. I'm not remarkable, I just did what anyone would do. No. Khalid set down the folder, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. You did what most people only talk about doing. There's a difference. Most people say they would sacrifice everything for family. You actually did it, for a child who shares none of your blood but all of your heart. I've always believed that people reveal their true character not in grand gestures but in daily choices. And Emma Santos had made the same choice every single day for 6 years, to put Lily's needs before her own survival. That kind of love doesn't announce itself. It simply exists, quiet and unshakable, in every $4 meal rationed, every 4 a.m. alarm, every night spent on a floor so Lily could have the mattress. The investigation reached its first major breakthrough on day 18, when a retired Dubai police detective named Hassan Farouk agreed to speak with Khalid's team. Hassan was 73 years old, living in a modest apartment in Abu Dhabi on a pension that barely covered his medications, and he had been waiting 17 years to tell someone what he knew. Your brother's accident, Hassan said, his voice crackling through the video call, was not an accident. I investigated it myself. The brake lines had been cut, professionally by someone who knew what they were doing. I wrote a report. I submitted it to my superiors, and the next day, I was transferred to traffic duty, and my report disappeared. Khalid's jaw tightened. Who ordered the transfer? I never knew for certain, but 3 days after your brother died, a man came to my apartment. He gave me an envelope containing $100,000 in cash and a message. Forget what you saw. Your family's safety depends on it. I had a daughter, Mr. Al-Rashid. She was 7 years old, the same age as your niece is now. Did you keep any evidence, anything at all? Hassan's weathered face flickered with something between pride and shame. I kept a copy of my original report, hidden for 17 years. I kept it because I knew someday someone would come asking, someone who deserved the truth. The report arrived by secure courier 3 days later. Khalid read it alone in his study at 2 a.m., and Emma asleep in the guest wing, Lily dreaming whatever dreams 6-year-olds dream when their world has suddenly become magical. The report confirmed what Khalid had feared. Omar's death was murder, not accident. And while Hassan hadn't been able to prove who ordered it, The timeline left little room for doubt. 3 days before Omar's death, he had written a letter promising to tell their father the truth about Rose. 2 days before Omar's death, $50,000 had been transferred from Hamid al-Rashid's personal account to an auto repair shop in Dubai. 1 day before Omar's death, that same auto repair shop had serviced Omar's car. The morning of Omar's death, he had driven that car down a mountain road with brakes that would fail at exactly the wrong moment. Khalid put down the report and stared at the wall of his study, at the framed photograph of his father that had hung there for 15 years, watching over him like a stern god demanding worship. Hamid al-Rashid, who had built an empire from nothing. Hamid al-Rashid, who had taught his sons that family honor was worth more than individual happiness. Hamid al-Rashid, who had apparently decided that his eldest son's life was a small price to pay for avoiding scandal. "Why?" Khalid whispered to the photograph. "He was your son, your firstborn. He worshipped you." The photograph, of course, did not answer. But somewhere in the silence, Khalid thought he heard his father's voice. The same voice that had explained Rose's departure when Khalid was 12. "She stole from us. We sent her away. A lie then. A lifetime of lies after." The next morning, Khalid made a decision that would have seemed impossible 3 weeks earlier. He called a press conference, not to address the scandal, not to defend himself against the business community's attacks, but to tell the truth. All of it. Emma tried to stop him. "You'll destroy your father's legacy," she said, her face pale. "Everything he built, everyone who respected him." "His legacy deserves to be destroyed," Khalid said quietly. "And the people who respected him were respecting a lie. I won't perpetuate that lie anymore. Not when Lily is watching. Not when she's learning what family means by watching how we behave. But the consequences, your business, your reputation. I already lost the business when I chose Lily over the contract. And my reputation?" Khalid almost laughed. "My reputation was built on my father's foundation. I'd rather have no reputation than one built on murder and bribery, and the silence of good people." The press conference was held at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday, exactly 25 days after Lily had walked into that boardroom and changed everything. 47 reporters crowded into the Al-Rashid Tower lobby, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward like weapons. The business world expected Khalid to announce his resignation, his bankruptcy, his fall from grace. Instead, he told them a love story. He told them about Omar and Rose, a young prince and a teenage maid who had fallen in love despite every boundary that should have kept them apart. He told them about Rose's pregnancy, his father's fury, the $50,000 payment to make her disappear. He told them about the letter Omar had written 3 days before his death, promising to claim his family. And he told them about Hassan's investigation, the cut brake lines, the suspicious transfers, the silencing of anyone who knew the truth. "My father murdered my brother," Khalid said, his voice steady even as cameras flashed and reporters gasped. "He murdered him to prevent a scandal, to protect our family's honor. And for 17 years, I believed the lie he told. I mourned my brother as a victim of fate when he was actually a victim of our father's monstrous pride." The room erupted in questions, but Khalid wasn't finished. "3 weeks ago, a 6-year-old girl walked into my boardroom and called me daddy. She wasn't my daughter. She's my great-niece, the grandchild of the brother my father killed. Her name is Lily, and she has worn the same shoes for 2 years because her aunt couldn't afford new ones. Her aunt, Emma Santos, has worked as a janitor in this building for 3 years, invisible to everyone, sacrificing everything to give Lily a life." He paused, his voice softening. "Emma and Lily are my family now, the only family that matters. And I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve them." This is the moment that always gets me when I tell this story. Because Khalid al-Rashid had every reason to stay silent. He could have paid Emma off like his father paid Rose. He could have buried the investigation, protected the family name, salvaged what remained of his business empire. Nobody would have blamed him. That's how the world works after all. Power protects power. But he chose differently. He chose truth over comfort, Love over legacy. A 6-year-old girl's future over a billion-dollar reputation. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Within hours of the press conference, Khalid's remaining board members resigned. His stock dropped another 34%. 3 separate investigations were launched, by Dubai authorities, by American regulators, by Interpol. His mother, Fatima al-Rashid, who had been living in comfortable denial in a Paris apartment for a decade, called to disown him publicly. "You have destroyed everything your father built," she said, her voice cold through the phone. "Everything he sacrificed for this family." "He sacrificed his son," Khalid replied. "My brother, your firstborn child. Did you know? Did you know what he did?" The silence on the other end lasted exactly 4 seconds before Fatima hung up. Khalid would never speak to her again. But here's what the news didn't report, because it wasn't sensational enough for headlines. 3 days after the press conference, a letter arrived at Al Rashid Tower. It was from a woman named Maria Chen, who had worked as an assistant to Hamid al-Rashid for 23 years. Her letter contained bank statements, recorded conversations, and documented proof of 7 other payments Hamid had made over the decades. Payments to silence employees, to bury lawsuits, to make inconvenient truths disappear. More letters followed. From former maids who had been paid to forget harassment, from business partners who had been threatened into compliance, from journalists who had been bribed to kill stories. Khalid's confession had opened a floodgate, and 17 years of secrets came pouring out. Emma found him on day 31, sitting in his study surrounded by letters, his face aged 10 years and a month. "There's so much," he said, his voice hollow. "So many people he hurt. So many lives he destroyed. And I worked for him. I admired him. I wanted to be him." Emma sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched, a small intimacy that had been growing between them without either acknowledging it. "You're not him," she said simply. "You proved that the moment you chose Lily over your contract." "Did I? Or was that just guilt? Just trying to balance some cosmic scale that can never be balanced?" "Does it matter?" Emma's voice was gentle but firm. "Does it matter why you did the right thing, as long as you did it?" "Khalid, I've spent my whole life watching people find reasons not to help. Reasons why they can't get involved, can't sacrifice, can't risk their comfort for someone else's survival. You had $2, $7 billion reasons to throw me and Lily out of that boardroom, and you didn't. That's not guilt. That's character." Khalid looked at her. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time. At the gray in her hair that had come from years of stress. At the calluses on her hands that had come from scrubbing floors. At the fierce love in her eyes that had sustained a child through poverty and loss. "You're remarkable," he said. "I told you that before, but I don't think you heard me. You're the most remarkable person I've ever met." Emma's cheeks flushed. "I'm a janitor who couldn't even afford to buy her niece new shoes. You're a woman who chose love over survival every single day for 6 years, who walked 7 miles to work in the snow because the money for subway fare could buy Lily a new textbook, who sold her blood twice a month so a child could have school supplies." Khalid's voice cracked. "My father had $4, $2 billion, and couldn't love anyone but himself. You had $4 in your pocket and loved enough for an entire family. Tell me again who's remarkable." Emma didn't answer. But when Khalid reached for her hand, she let him take it. And in that moment, surrounded by evidence of his father's crimes, his empire crumbling, his reputation destroyed, Khalid felt something he hadn't felt in 17 years. Hope. The next 3 months were a careful reconstruction, not of the Al-Rashid business empire that was beyond saving, sold off piece by piece to pay settlements and legal fees, but of something more important. A family. Khalid moved Emma and Lily from the guest suite into the main residence. He helped Emma apply to nursing school, a 3-year program at Columbia that she had dreamed about since she was Lily's age. He hired tutors for Lily, not to accelerate her already impressive academics, but to help her process the enormous changes in her life through art and music and play. He testified at 4 separate hearings about his father's crimes, providing evidence that would eventually lead to the posthumous stripping of every honor Hamid al-Rashid had ever received. And slowly, quietly, something else was growing. It started with small things. Emma making coffee for Khalid exactly the way he liked it, strong, no sugar, a splash of cream, without being asked. Khalid remembering that Emma's birthday was March 15th and filling her room with sunflowers because she had mentioned once, in passing, that they were her mother's favorite. Lily starting to call Khalid Uncle K, and then 3 months after the boardroom, simply Uncle. She asked me, Emma told Khalid one evening, her voice careful, if you were going to be her new daddy. I told her you were her uncle. She said. Emma paused, a small smile crossing her face. She said uncles can become daddies if they try hard enough. Khalid's heart twisted. What do you want me to say to that? I don't know. Emma looked at him, her eyes searching. What do you want to say? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. They had been dancing around it for weeks, the late-night conversations, the accidental touches, the way they both found excuses to be in the same room. But neither had been willing to name it, afraid perhaps that naming it would destroy it. I want to say, Khalid began slowly, that I used to think I knew what I was building toward. The contracts, the deals, the empire. I thought that was the point of everything, to become so powerful that nothing could hurt me. He paused, looking at Emma with an openness that surprised them both. And then a 6-year-old girl called me daddy, and I realized I had spent 35 years building the wrong thing entirely. What do you want to build now? Something that matters, something real. He reached for her hand again, something that had become a habit between them, this small bridge of touch. Something with you and Lily, if you'll let me. Emma was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I'm scared. I've spent so long just surviving. For Lily, for my mother's memory, for my sister who never got to see her daughter grow up. I don't know how to do anything else. I don't know how to let someone else carry part of the weight. You don't have to know. Khalid squeezed her hand. We can figure it out together, one day at a time, one choice at a time. That's what family is supposed to be. Not the weight you carry alone, but the weight you share. This conversation would have continued, might have led somewhere beautiful. But at that exact moment, Lily came running in from the other room, her face bright with 6-year-old urgency. Uncle K, Emma, you have to see what I made. She was holding a piece of paper, a drawing done in crayon, the colors vivid and imprecise. In it, 3 figures stood in front of a tall building. A man in a suit, a woman with brown hair, and a small girl between them, holding both their hands. Above them, in wobbly letters, Lily had written, My family. It's us, Lily announced proudly. See? That's Uncle K, and that's Emma, and that's me. And up there. She pointed to a cloud in the corner of the drawing, where 2 more figures were visible. That's my mommy Sophia and Grandma Rose. They're watching us from heaven. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Khalid felt his own throat tighten. It's beautiful, Lily, Emma managed. I know, Lily said with the supreme confidence of a 6-year-old. I'm going to put it on the refrigerator. All families put drawings on the refrigerator. That's the rule. She ran off to find tape, her small feet pattering against the marble floors that had once symbolized Khalid's wealth and now symbolized something far more valuable. My family, Emma read from the drawing, her voice breaking on a laugh. She spelled it wrong. She spelled it perfectly, Khalid said. That's exactly what we are. But the peace was about to be shattered, because in Dubai, in a palatial home overlooking the Persian Gulf, Fatima al-Rashid was making plans, and she had decided that Khalid's betrayal of the family name would not go unpunished. And in a modest apartment in Queens, a man named Victor Santos, Emma's estranged father, who had abandoned his family when Emma was 4 years old, was watching the news coverage with calculating eyes, recognizing an opportunity. 2 threats were converging on the small family that Khalid, Emma, and Lily were trying to build, and neither Emma nor Khalid had any idea what was coming. The first sign of trouble came on a Thursday morning, Exactly 4 months after Lily had walked into the boardroom, Khalid was reviewing the final paperwork for his father's estate settlement when his assistant informed him that a woman was waiting in the lobby, demanding to see him. A woman who claimed to be his mother. Fatima al-Rashid had not set foot in America in 6 years. She had not spoken to her son in 3 months, not since the press conference where he had accused her husband of murder. But here she was, standing in the marble lobby of Al-Rashid Tower, dressed in a black Chanel suit that cost more than Emma had earned in a year as a janitor, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Mother," Khalid's voice was carefully neutral as he met her by the elevators. "This is unexpected." "I imagine it is." Fatima's accent was thick with disdain, the accent of old Dubai money, of women who had never worked a day in their lives but considered themselves superior to those who had. "We need to talk, privately." They went to Khalid's office, the same office where, 4 months ago, he had knelt on the floor to look a 6-year-old girl in the eyes. Fatima surveyed the room with obvious displeasure, her gaze lingering on a framed drawing that hung near Khalid's desk. Lily's My Family artwork, now professionally mounted and displayed like fine art. "So it's true," Fatima said coldly. "You've replaced your real family with that." "That is Lily's drawing, and she is my real family. She's Omar's granddaughter. She's the offspring of a maid who seduced your brother." Fatima's voice dripped with contempt. "A fortune hunter's bastard daughter, and you've given her the Al-Rashid name. Let her live in our family home, destroyed everything your father built. For what? To ease your guilty conscience? To do what's right?" Khalid forced himself to remain calm, though his hands had clenched into fists beneath his desk. "Father murdered Omar. He paid to have his own son killed rather than accept. Your father protected this family." Fatima's mask cracked, revealing something raw and desperate beneath. "He did what was necessary. Omar was going to throw away everything, his future, our reputation, your inheritance, for a girl who cleaned toilets. Your father made a difficult choice. A sacrifice. He sacrificed his son. He sacrificed his weak son to protect his strong one." Fatima leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "You, Khalid. You were the one your father believed in, the one he trained to take over the empire, and now you're throwing it all away for the same reason Omar would have, for a maid and her bastard child." The word hit Khalid like a physical blow. Bastard. Used to describe Lily, the brightest, most hopeful person he had ever known. "Get out." His voice was quiet but deadly. "Get out of my building and don't ever speak about Lily that way again. I came to offer you a chance." Fatima didn't move. "A way to salvage what's left of your father's legacy. I have lawyers, very good lawyers, who can make the janitor and her niece disappear, not like your father did it, legally. A settlement, non-disclosure agreements, a one-way ticket back to whatever poverty they came from. You can rebuild, Khalid. Find a suitable wife. Have proper heirs. The Al-Rashid name doesn't have to die with you. The Al-Rashid name should have died with father. It's a name built on lies and murder and the abuse of anyone who couldn't fight back." Khalid stood, towering over his mother's seated form. "I'm going to build something new, something worth having. And if you try to hurt Emma or Lily, legally or otherwise, I will dedicate every resource I have left to making sure the world knows exactly who Fatima al-Rashid really is." Mother and son stared at each other across a chasm that had been forming for 35 years. Finally, Fatima rose, her movements stiff with barely controlled rage. "You'll regret this," she said. "When that janitor reveals her true nature, when she takes your money and your name and leaves you with nothing, you'll remember that your mother tried to warn you. Her name is Emma, and she's already given me more than you or father ever did." Fatima left without another word, but Khalid knew this wasn't over. His mother was not a woman who accepted defeat gracefully. What he didn't know, couldn't know, was that his mother's visit was only the first move in a chess game that would nearly destroy everything. The second move came 2 weeks later, in the form of Victor Santos. Emma was picking Lily up from school when she saw him, a man in his 60s, standing across the street from the school entrance watching. He had the same brown hair as Emma, now grayed. the same narrow shoulders, the same eyes that Emma saw every time she looked in the mirror. Her father, the man who had walked out when she was 4 years old, leaving her mother to raise 2 daughters alone, the man who had never paid child support, never called on birthdays, never shown up to a single graduation or funeral, the man who, according to her mother's deathbed confession, had gambled away every penny they'd saved, and then simply vanished. Emma. Victor crossed the street, his smile too wide, his eyes too calculating. My God, look at you, all grown up, and doing so well for yourself from what I hear. Emma's arms tightened around Lily, who was looking between them with a child's uncanny perception of adult tension. Go back inside the school, Lily. Wait for me with your teacher. But Emma, now please. Lily went, her small feet reluctant. Victor watched her go, his smile never wavering. Beautiful child, he said. Your sister's daughter, right? Sophia's girl. I was sorry to hear about Sophia. And your mother. 2 funerals I couldn't make it to. Life's been complicated. What do you want? Emma's voice was flat, betraying none of the tornado of emotions churning inside her. To reconnect, to make amends. Victor's hands spread in a gesture of innocence. I know I wasn't there for you girls. I've lived with that regret every day. But now I see you've found yourself quite the situation, living with a billionaire, your niece in private school, and I thought maybe we could help each other. Help each other how? Well, a man like Khalid al-Rashid, he's vulnerable right now. Lost his business, his reputation, his family. He's clinging to you and that little girl like life rafts. And a smart woman could leverage that situation. Get herself set up for life, get her family set up for life. The implication was clear. Victor wanted in on whatever he imagined Emma had going. I'm not leveraging anything. Emma's voice shook with anger. Khalid is our family. He's... Family. Victor laughed. Family is what you make of it, sweetheart. I'm your family, your blood. And I've got debts, serious debts, to some serious people. They're not patient people, Emma. They've already started asking questions about you, about that little girl, about where you're living now. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Help me, or I'll bring dangerous people into your life. Stay away from us. Emma's voice was deadly quiet. Stay away from Lily. If I see you near her again, you'll what? Call your billionaire boyfriend? Victor's smile turned ugly. I've already talked to some reporters, Emma. Told them some interesting stories about your mother, about her immigration status, about some questionable choices she made when you girls were young. Nothing that's necessarily true, but nothing that can be disproved either. The press loves a good scandal. And wouldn't it be convenient if the story about Khalid al-Rashid's janitor girlfriend got a little more complicated? He walked away before Emma could respond, leaving her standing on the sidewalk with shaking hands and a heart full of dread. She didn't tell Khalid. That was her first mistake. She told herself it was to protect him, to protect Lily, to handle it herself the way she had handled everything else in her life. Victor was bluffing. He had to be. He was a deadbeat and a gambler, not a criminal mastermind. If she ignored him, he would go away. But Victor didn't go away. 3 days later, an article appeared in a tabloid website. Janitor claims billionaire baby daddy. But what is she hiding? The article was full of innuendo and anonymous sources who claimed Emma's mother had been involved in immigration fraud, that Emma herself had targeted Khalid al-Rashid for months before the boardroom incident, that the whole thing was an elaborate con. Khalid found Emma crying in the bathroom at 3 a.m. The article pulled up on her phone. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice more hurt than angry. When did you see him? 2 weeks ago, outside Lily's school. Emma couldn't meet his eyes. I thought if I ignored him, he would go away. I didn't want you to have to deal with more problems because of me. You're not a problem. Khalid knelt beside her the same way he had knelt beside Lily in that boardroom 4 months ago. You're the solution. Don't you understand that yet? You and Lily. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. But look at what I've brought into your life. My father, the press, the scandal. None of that is your fault, and none of it changes anything. He took her hands, the same hands that had scrubbed his floors, sold their blood for $40, carried a child through 6 years of poverty. We handle this together. That's what family does. Emma finally looked at him, her eyes red-rimmed but hopeful. Together? Together. The next morning, Khalid's lawyers served Victor Santos with a cease and desist order. When Victor tried to retaliate with more stories, Khalid held a second press conference. This time not to expose his father, but to expose the tabloid industry that had been harassing Emma. "Emma Santos is the most honest person I've ever met," Khalid said, cameras flashing. "She worked 16-hour days scrubbing floors to give her niece a chance at life. She sold her blood twice a month for $40 so a child could have school supplies. She walked 7 miles to work in the snow because the subway fare could buy a meal. And now, because she dared to become my family, she's being attacked by a father who abandoned her at age 4, and tabloids who profit from pain." He paused, his eyes finding Emma in the crowd, where she stood with Lily's hand in hers. "I'm done with shame. I'm done with secrets. I'm done with a world that punishes people for being vulnerable. Emma Santos is the love of my life, and Lily is the daughter of my heart, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." The phrase hung in the air, the love of my life. Khalid hadn't planned to say it, but looking at Emma's face, shock and hope and something that looked like the beginning of joy, he knew it was true. Victor Santos disappeared after the press conference. Khalid's investigators later discovered that someone had paid Victor $75,000 to create problems, someone who had also been feeding stories to the tabloids, someone who wanted the new Al-Rashid family to fail. Fatima, his mother. The chess game was escalating, and the most devastating move was yet to come. The attack came on a Thursday, 3 days before Lily's 7th birthday. Khalid had been planning a party, the first real birthday party Lily had ever had, with 23 classmates invited, a magician, a bounce house, and a cake from the same bakery that had made Khalid's childhood cakes before his world turned cold and corporate. But at 4:47 p.m., on that Thursday, 3 men in suits arrived at Al-Rashid Tower with a court order. "We're here for the child," the lead man said, his voice clinical. "Emma Santos is being investigated for child endangerment and fraud. The state has issued an emergency custody order pending investigation. The child is to be placed in temporary foster care." Emma screamed. Actually screamed, a sound that tore through the building like something primal and wounded. Khalid grabbed her before she could lunge at the men, holding her back even as his own heart shattered. "This is wrong," he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Who issued this order? On what grounds?" The complaint was filed by Fatima al-Rashid, the child's closest biological relative who is not under investigation. Mrs. al-Rashid claims that Emma Santos has been exploiting the child for financial gain and that the child is in danger. Fatima, of course, his mother's final move. "I want to call my lawyer," Khalid said. "You have that right. But the child comes with us now." Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale with fear. She had heard the screaming. "Emma? Uncle Kay? What's happening?" "Nothing, sweetheart." Emma's voice broke on every word. "Everything's going to be fine. Just a misunderstanding. You're going to go with these nice men for a little while and then—" "No!" Lily ran down the stairs, throwing herself into Emma's arms. "No, no, no. You said we were a family. You said—" "We are a family." Emma held her so tightly it must have hurt. "We will always be a family. This is just a test. Remember what I told you about tests? Sometimes life tests us to see how strong our love is. Our love is very, very strong, Lily. Nothing can break it. Do you understand?" Lily was crying too hard to respond. The men moved forward. Khalid stepped between them and the child. "She's not going anywhere until I speak with my lawyer. Sir, we have a court order. If you interfere, you'll be arrested for obstruction." The next 43 minutes were the worst of Khalid's life. Worse than learning his father had murdered his brother. Worse than watching his empire crumble. Because this time he wasn't losing money or reputation. He was watching a little girl being torn from the only family she had ever known. Lily's last words, as they carried her out the door would haunt him for years. "Uncle K, you promised. You promised you'd protect me." Emma collapsed the moment the door closed. Khalid caught her before she hit the floor, and they stayed like that. Two people broken by a system that was supposed to protect children, but had been weaponized by a grandmother who had never even met her great-grandchild. "I'll get her back," Khalid said into Emma's hair, the words fierce with determination. "I swear to you I'll get her back." What happened over the next 17 days was a legal war. Khalid hired 12 lawyers, the best custody attorneys in New York, plus a team of investigators to prove that Fatima's claims were fabricated. Emma had to submit to drug tests, psychological evaluations, home inspections, and interviews with social workers who seemed determined to find something wrong with her. "Ms. Santos, how do you explain the condition of your previous apartment? The mattress on the floor, the lack of proper heating?" "I couldn't afford better. I worked 3 jobs and it still wasn't enough. But Lily was fed. She was loved. She was happy." "And your relationship with Mr. Al-Rashid? How quickly did that progress?" We weren't. It's not about money. It was never about money." The questions went on for hours, days. Emma's past was dissected, her mother's immigration history examined, her sister's death investigated as if it were somehow relevant. Khalid was questioned too, about his mental state, about his motivations, about whether he was truly capable of providing a stable home given the destruction of his business empire. "You lost $2, $7 billion in a single day," one attorney said. "You publicly accused your father of murder. Your own mother has filed statements claiming you're unstable and being manipulated by a fortune hunter. How can you argue that you're a fit guardian for this child?" "Because I chose her." Khalid's voice was steady despite the exhaustion that had settled into his bones. "I chose Lily over the $7 billion. I chose her over my father's legacy. I chose her over my mother's approval. Every single time I chose her, and I will keep choosing her until my last breath. This is what real love looks like, I think. Not the fairy tale version where everything works out because the universe is fair. Real love is choosing someone when it costs you everything. It's standing in front of a hostile courtroom and saying, 'Yes, I gave up my fortune for a 6-year-old girl.' I'd do it again." The breakthrough came on day 15, when one of Khalid's investigators discovered something crucial. Fatima al-Rashid had never met Lily, had never shown any interest in her great-granddaughter until Khalid's press conference, had not mentioned the child once in 3 months of silence. And more importantly, Fatima had made payments to the same tabloid that had published the stories about Emma. The judge reviewed the evidence. The connection between Fatima's payments and the sudden appearance of concerned articles about Emma's fitness as a guardian was impossible to ignore. Add to that the fact that Fatima had no relationship with Lily, had actively worked to separate the child from her only family, and had made public statements calling the child a bastard. The custody order was reversed on day 17. Lily was returned to Emma and Khalid that evening, thinner than she had been, darker shadows under her eyes, but still, impossibly beautifully, still Lily. She ran to Emma first, then to Khalid, then back to Emma, her small body trying to hug both of them at once. "I knew you'd come," she kept saying. "I knew you'd find me. I told the other kids at the foster place, I said my family is coming. They didn't believe me, but I knew." "We'll always come for you," Khalid said, his voice breaking. "Always, Lily. That's what family means." That night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep in her own bed with all 7 of her stuffed animals arranged around her like guardian angels, Emma and Khalid sat together in the living room. They didn't speak for a long time. What was there to say? They had almost lost everything that mattered. "Khalid," Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "What you said at the press conference, did you mean it?" "Which part?" "The part about me being—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "The love of my life?" Khalid took her hand. "Yes, I meant it. I've been trying to find the right time to say it, the right way, but there is no right time, there's just now. This moment. You and me and a little girl sleeping in the next room. I don't know how to do this. Emma's eyes were bright with unshed tears. No one's ever, neither have I, but I don't want to do it with anyone else. Khalid moved closer, his forehead touching hers. We'll figure it out together, like we've figured out everything else. When they kissed for the first time, it wasn't like the movies. There were no fireworks, no swelling music. It was quiet and gentle and tasted like tears, and it was the most real thing either of them had ever experienced. And in her bedroom, Lily smiled in her sleep, dreaming of a castle where 3 people lived together forever. The hearing to permanently sever Fatima al-Rashid's parental rights, a technical requirement given her biological connection to Lily, took place 6 weeks after Lily came home. It was held in the same courthouse where, 17 days earlier, a judge had temporarily stolen Lily from her family. Fatima attended with an army of lawyers. She was dressed impeccably, her face composed, her story practiced. She was a concerned grandmother. She had only wanted what was best for the child. She had been misled about the nature of Emma's relationship with Khalid. She deserved a chance to know her great-grandchild. The judge listened, and then she called Lily to the stand. This is the moment that changes everything, I think. Because Lily was 7 years old now, her birthday had passed during the custody battle, uncelebrated, and she had learned some things about adults in those 17 days away from home. She had learned that they sometimes lied. She had learned that they sometimes used children as weapons. She had learned that blood didn't make family. Lily, the judge said gently, do you know who that woman is? Lily looked at Fatima. She says she's my great-grandmother. And do you want to spend time with her? Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, my Emma says that family is the people who choose you when they don't have to. My Uncle Kay chose me. He gave up all his money for me. Emma chose me even though I'm not her real daughter. But that lady, she pointed at Fatima, she never chose me. She called me bad words. She tried to take me away from my family. So no, I don't want to spend time with her. I want to go home. The courtroom was silent. Fatima's composed face had cracked, revealing something ugly beneath. She's been coached, Fatima said. The janitor has poisoned her against me. Mrs. al-Rashid. The judge's voice was cold. I've reviewed the evidence. I've seen the payments you made to tabloids. I've read the statements you gave calling this child, your own flesh and blood, a bastard. I've examined the paper trail showing that you orchestrated this custody crisis specifically to hurt your son. In all my years on the bench, I have rarely seen such calculated cruelty. She paused. Your petition for visitation rights is denied, permanently, and I am referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation of potential child endangerment charges. Fatima stood, her composure finally shattering. You can't do this. I am Fatima al-Rashid. My husband built an empire. Your husband is dead, Mrs. al-Rashid, and his empire was built on lies, just like your attempt to destroy this family. The judge turned to Khalid and Emma. Mr. al-Rashid, Ms. Santos, you may take your daughter home. Your daughter. The words hung in the air like a blessing. After the hearing, after they had driven back to the penthouse and Lily had run off to tell her stuffed animals about the mean lady who got in trouble, Emma and Khalid stood on the balcony overlooking Central Park. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and somewhere in the park below children were playing, their laughter rising up like music. It's over, Emma said. It's really over. No. Khalid pulled her close. It's just beginning. 3 months later, on a sunny Saturday in September, they held a small ceremony in the penthouse, just 20 guests, mostly Lily's school friends and their parents, plus a handful of people who had stood by them through the crisis. Khalid adopted Lily officially, his signature on the paperwork making him her legal father. And Emma said yes. The wedding was simple. Emma wore a white dress that cost $400, which she had insisted on paying for herself with money from her new job as a nursing student intern. Khalid wore a suit that was nice but not ostentatious. Not the $4,200 Brioni from that boardroom day, but something more modest, more fitting for a man who had learned that love mattered more than labels. Lily was the flower girl. She threw rose petals with such enthusiasm that most of them landed in her own hair, and when the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, she raised her hand and said, "I object to anyone who objects." The gathered friends laughed. Emma cried. Khalid had never been happier in his entire life. "I, Khalid, take you, Emma, to be my wife, to love you when love is easy and when it's hard, to choose you every single day the way you chose Lily, to build something real and true with you, something our daughter can be proud of. I, Emma, take you, Khalid, to be my husband, to stand beside you in boardrooms and courtrooms and living rooms, to remind you when you forget that you're more than your last name, to love you and Lily and whatever this crazy family becomes, until my last breath." When they kissed, Lily cheered so loudly that the neighbors complained. Khalid tipped the neighbors $500 to forgive them, and the celebration continued until midnight. 1 year later, Emma graduated from nursing school, top of her class the same way Lily was top of her second grade class. Khalid had rebuilt a small piece of his business empire, not in energy this time, but in affordable housing, creating developments that served families like Emma's had been, families who worked multiple jobs and still couldn't afford a proper home. 2 years later, Emma gave birth to a boy they named Omar, after the uncle Lily would never meet but who had started it all with a love story that refused to die. 3 years later, Lily, now 10 years old, stood in front of her 5th grade class and gave a presentation about her family. "This is my mom, Emma," she said, pointing to a photo. "She used to be a janitor. Now she's a nurse. She's the bravest person I know because she chose to be my mom even though she didn't have to. This is my dad, Khalid. He used to be a billionaire. He gave it all up because he said I was worth more than money. Sometimes I think he's lying, but then he helps me with my math homework and I know it's true. This is my baby brother, Omar. He's named after my biological grandfather, who died before I was born, but who loved my grandmother so much that he was going to give up everything for her. Just like my dad gave up everything for me. And this is my grandmother Rose and my mother Sophia. They're in heaven now, but they're still part of my family, because family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about who chooses you. My family started with 3 words in a boardroom. "You're my daddy," I said. And even though it wasn't true the way I thought it was, it became true. Because my dad heard me. He saw me. He chose me. That's what family is. It's seeing someone, really seeing them, and choosing them anyway. The classroom was silent when Lily finished. Her teacher was crying. Several parents who had come to watch the presentations were wiping their eyes. In the back of the room, Emma and Khalid stood together, their hands intertwined, their hearts fuller than they had ever been. "She gets that from you," Emma whispered. "Which part?" "The part where she makes everyone cry." Khalid laughed softly. "I think she gets that from you. All the good parts of her are you." They walked home that day, all 4 of them, because Omar was strapped to Khalid's chest in a carrier, and they didn't take a car. They walked through Central Park, the same park that Khalid had looked down on from the 47th floor when he thought success meant contracts and billions and power. Lily ran ahead, her backpack bouncing. Omar gurgled happily against Khalid's chest. Emma held Khalid's hand, her nursing badge still clipped to her scrubs from her morning shift. "Do you ever miss it?" Emma asked. "The empire? The money? The power?" Khalid thought about it for a moment. Then he shook his head. "I had everything money could buy, and I was miserable. I had nothing worth losing." He looked at Lily, spinning in circles on the path ahead. At Omar, drooling contentedly on his shirt. At Emma, the janitor who had become his wife, his partner, his home. "Now I have everything worth losing, and I've never been happier." Even though it all started with a lie, Emma's voice was soft, wondering. "She wasn't your daughter. Those 3 words weren't true. They were truer than anything else in my life." Khalid stopped walking, turning to face his wife. "Before Lily walked into that boardroom, I was building an empire on my father's lies. I was becoming him. I was going to spend my whole life proving myself to a dead man who had murdered his own son for the sake of reputation. He paused. Lily's 3 words stopped all of that. They weren't technically true, but they were the truest thing anyone had ever said to me. Because she saw me. Not the businessman, not the Al-Rashid heir, just me. And she decided I was worth claiming. Emma's eyes were bright with tears. You know what I love most about our story? Tell me. It started with a mistake. Lily wasn't supposed to be in that boardroom. I wasn't supposed to let her out of my sight. If I had been a better guardian, none of this would have happened. We wouldn't have met. You would have signed your contract and become a billionaire again, and I would have kept scrubbing floors until my hands fell off. So what do you love about that? That sometimes our mistakes are better than our plans. Emma smiled. That sometimes the universe knows what we need better than we do. That 3 words from a 6-year-old girl saved your life. And mine. Khalid pulled her close, right there in the middle of the path, while tourists walked around them and Lily made daisy chains in the grass nearby. I love you, he said. I love our daughter and our son and this ridiculous, beautiful, impossible life we've built. I love you too. Emma kissed him softly. My janitor hands and all, especially your janitor hands. Dad, Mom, look. Lily came running over, a crown of daisies in her hair. I made one for everyone. She placed a flower crown on Emma's head, then on Khalid's. Then she carefully arranged one on baby Omar's head, where it immediately slid down over his eyes. He giggled, delighted. Now we're all royalty, Lily declared. The Santos Al-Rashid royal family. Is that what we are? Khalid laughed. Of course. Lily looked at him like he was being very silly. We're royalty, because we have something most people don't. What's that? We chose each other on purpose when we didn't have to. She straightened her own flower crown with dignity. That makes us the most royal family in the whole world. Khalid looked at Emma. Emma looked back at him. They were both crying and laughing at the same time, and somewhere above them, Omar and Rose and Sophia were watching. She's right, you know, Emma said. She usually is. They walked home as the sun set over Central Park. 4 people bound not by blood but by choice, by sacrifice, by the kind of love that sees someone, really sees them, and decides they're worth everything. 3 words had started it all. You're my daddy. And in the end, those 3 words had become the truest words ever spoken, because Khalid was Lily's daddy, not by blood, not by accident, but by choice, by the daily decision to show up, to protect, to love without condition. That's the story of how a 6-year-old girl saved a billionaire's soul. And if you're still here, still listening, I want you to remember something. Family isn't who you're born to. Family is who you become for each other. In boardrooms and courtrooms and living rooms everywhere, people are making that choice right now. Choosing love over money, choosing truth over reputation, choosing the hard, beautiful work of becoming family to someone who needs them. Maybe that's what you're being called to do too. 3 words. That's all it takes to change everything. What will your 3 words be?